So we know that switches learn MAC addresses, and that's great. We know that we can show a list of MAC addresses, and that's even better. But when you want to find that one MAC address among 2,000 of them, that's where it can be a bit challenging. This is actually one of my favorite things to do, and it happens so often in every network environment. You're trying to track down a server. Where's it plugged in? You find somebody surfing inappropriate content. You're like, which device is that? Or you're trying to figure out who's the bandwidth hog on the network sucking up all the internet bandwidth. All of those things will hone down to finding an individual MAC address in the switch table. So, in this nugget, we will explore the methods used to make finding MAC addresses simple and fun. Fun, you say? Totally. I have a great time doing this. So I'm going to bring a command prompt into the window and do an ipconfig/all. Because there's something I often forget that I don't want to forget, I don't want to overlook, and that is MAC address format. You see this right here? That's the MAC address as seen by a Windows computer. 9C-EB-E8, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'm going to bring up the console connection to the switch where that computer is connected, do a show MAC address table, space down through all the static MAC addresses to the dynamic one. This is the same MAC address. Hang on, let's bring them both up so we can see them in the same screen at the same time. That's the same MAC address as this in Cisco format. You see a couple things. One, lowercase and uppercase is not a big deal between these two. Windows puts everything in uppercase. Cisco, everything in lowercase. Second thing that we notice is dashes and periods, and sometimes even where they're placed is not a big deal. Cisco prefers to group MAC addresses into groups of 4, whereas Windows prefers to group MAC addresses into little groups of 2 characters apiece. You'll find that Linux also changes things up a little bit. They prefer to do MAC addresses with colons in between instead of dashes. Truth be told, it doesn't really matter when it comes to physical MAC addresses, and that's not the case for a lot of other addresses like IP addresses. IP version 4, you got the period between them. You're not going to use a colon. You're not going to use a dash. It's a period every single time, whereas MAC address format will vary around. So first off, get used to that, because some of the filtering methods I'm going to show you, I'm going to say, well, let's look for the MAC address with FD1A. And you might do a search and try and filter on FD-1A, and you won't get any results, because in Cisco's world, it truly is FD1A with no delimiter in between them. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to show you. Second thing is that Cisco has some easy filtering methods built in right away. You can see that I can do a show MAC address table, type in address, hit question mark, and it says if you just want to type in a specific address that you're looking for, let's cheat and let's just grab that guy. That one, I'll put copy and paste, hit enter, it'll filter it down to look for exactly that MAC address. That's really useful when you're trying to filter around and you know exactly what it is, you know it's going to be somewhere around this switch, and you can find it right there, right? Second thing is that they have the ability to filter to a specific interface. I'll hit the up arrow, do show MAC address table, question mark again. This one you'll use all the time. So I'll say interface, hit the question mark, fast Ethernet 0/13. Sure enough, once again, it says, here's all the MAC addresses that are on that interface. Let's see a couple of them. I'll do fast Ethernet 0/2, hit enter, and you can see that we've got 2 MAC addresses that are learned on that interface. So now let me show you the ultimate filtering command that you can use with the show MAC address table. And it was nothing at all that you saw when you hit the question mark. Actually, scratch that. It is. You'll see this on just about every single command that you can type in the Cisco iOS. If I do a show running config and hit the question mark, you'll always see the output modifier, show interface. You'll see it on every single command, show interface, all these options, and the last one, good grief, there's a lot of options, will be output modifiers, always output modifiers. Anybody who's used the Linux, hang on, let me type this first. Address table, hit the question mark. Anybody that's used Linux before and knows the power of the grep command will appreciate this. Now, there is no grep command in the Cisco iOS. Instead, they've called it include right here. If I type in include, I can then type in a line, meaning whatever I want to filter. And you can get crazy with this. You can get into things called regular expressions and say, I just want to see certain da-da-da. And you don't have to do that when you're working with the Cisco iOS. The include command is really good for wildcard-based matching, meaning I want to see MAC addresses that have this in them. For example, I'll bring my command prompt back up, FD1A. By the way, when you're filtering for MAC addresses, when you're looking for them, the first 6 characters are kind of irrelevant. That's because MAC addresses, when you can draw a line right down the middle, the first 6 represent the vendor ID. So you'll have a bunch of MAC addresses that have the same first 6 characters. The last 6 represents the interface ID. So you've got vendor, such as Dell, such as Xerox, such as all the vendors that make network interface cards, right? The last 6 represents the individual addresses that they created. So those are almost guaranteed to be unique when you're trying to filter. So I always look at the last 6, and for me, I'm a lazy kind of guy. I'll just take the last 4. So I'll say include FD1A. Notice what I did is I made sure that I transpose that, if you will, into Cisco format. Cisco doesn't have the dash, so I'm not going to put that in there. FD1A should be the last 4, and I hit enter, and it says, sure enough, there you go. The truth be told, you can use this include command for all kinds of things. I could do show running config and say include interfaces, or just INT, and it'll show anything that has INT anywhere in there. I could type in, for instance, ETH, right? And I could change it around, ETH. One thing worth mentioning, see, I did that on purpose. It's case sensitive, so I have to put capital ETH if I'm going to match the fast Ethernet as it's showing right there, right? So you can use this include command. Again, if you're familiar with Linux, it's just like grep to filter it down to exactly what you want. So I'm back to the question that I started this whole nugget with. Where is that guy? He's sucking up all the bandwidth. I would say, well, what's his MAC address? And the network, or I should say the system admin would go, I don't know what his MAC address is. I know what his IP address is. And I go, great. Give me his IP address. And they say, it's 192.168.1.2. And I ping that address because I know that my computer will do an ARP lookup. And then I'll do an ARP-A. And I go, okay, his MAC address is... not under this interface. That threw me for a second. This is 192.168.150. I have a different interface right here. This is the interface that I have connected to the Cisco network. His MAC address is 00 blah, 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 right? So now I take that and I go, okay, well, let me take those last 4 characters, D940, right? Come back here and say, show me the MAC address table, show D940. Oh yeah, he's actually on fast Ethernet 0/2. And then the system admin goes, what's that connected to? And I pull out my pack of interface, my patch panel list, which you would have learned from the IT Expert cabling series. And I go, oh, that goes to Bob's desk. Go find Bob. And the system admin goes and tackles Bob. That's the methods you can use to make finding MAC addresses simple and fun. Again, the built-in utilities are great. Show MAC address interface, show MAC address, and type in the actual address. But that pipe include command is priceless. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.